Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Big Time Boxing is back tomorrow on Tuesday. Not a time of the week when we're used to seeing major fights, but things happen a little bit differently in Japan. And I am talking about the rematch between the monster Naoya Inoue and the Filipino Flash Nonito Donaire. Now, it's a fight that everybody's been looking forward to because in their last encounter in 2019, it became Ring Magazine's Fight of the Year. It was an epic fight, and Inoue won there by points. But in defeat, Donaire covered himself in glory. He had a sort of a strange run. He seemed to be at the tail end of his career, and then he moved down to bantamweight suddenly for the World Boxing Super Series. He entered that tournament. He had a little bit of luck of a draw there in the beginning. He won on an injury TKO over Ryan Burnett, and then Zolani Tete got injured before their fight, and he knocked out a relatively unknown Stephen Fulton, and he got to the finals against Naoya Inoue. But in that loss, he covered himself in glory because he almost had Inoue out of there. I think it was the 9th or the 10th round when he had Inoue in some deep trouble there. But Inoue gutted it out, scored a knockdown eventually, and ran home a decision winner. But it was a fight where it looked at the stage that Naoya Inoue, the monster, is after all becoming human. Now, what has happened since? The logic would dictate that Inoue, the much younger man, should win by late stoppage or by decision, and that's how almost everybody in the boxing world is seeing this fight, although they know, out of respect for Nonito Donaire, he's a multi-weight world champion, that he's going to give Inoue a stern argument. That is not to be debated. Quite a while back, I was at Emperor's Palace here in South Africa, and I was talking at the way into Reino Liebenberg, light heavyweight, super middleweight that we have here in South Africa. And he asked me who is my favorite fighter at that moment. And it's a difficult question for somebody like me because I watch a lot of fights, and I have many favorites. It depends what style you're asking about, or what country, international, local. But after giving it some thought, I had to say my favorite fighter is Naoya Inoue. For everything that he does, he's got almost perfect offensive technique. His punches are clean and crisp. He's got heavy hands. He goes for the knockout, but he is technically sound as well. And then also for his few shortcomings, Inoue can be hit. If you are brave enough to stand there and exchange with him, or not being bowled over by his power, Inoue can be hit. Because if you look at him, he doesn't move his head much. His head is pretty much a stationary target. He comes in with his hands like that, and his head is a stationary target. He steps in and out of the way, and he controls the distance that way. But if you are in an exchange, or if you're still standing after he's unloaded on you, Inoue is there to be hit, and that sometimes makes for fights like we saw against Donaire. And now, ever since then, if Nonito Donaire had a few run-of-the-mill fights that he's just won and he kept ticking over, I would also be convinced that Naoya Inoue is going to win it clearly on points or with a TKO, and that seems to be a logical possibility. But there's something about Nonito Donaire that gives me a feeling about him. Since he came out of that Inoue fight, the first Inoue fight, after such a grueling war, you would expect him to have spent it all in the ring and not look the same anymore. My thoughts were it's a good high note to go out to pasture now, to retire. But instead of that, Donaire took on the WBC bantamweight champion Nordine Oubaali, and I was very impressed in that fight. Oubaali is a tricky southpaw boxer, but Inoue simply destroyed him in 4 rounds, absolutely annihilated him. So that was something I didn't expect coming off a war with Inoue. And then he also put pay to another Filipino, Raymond Caballo. He knocked him out with a body shot as well. And Caballo isn't on the level of Oubaali, who is better than your average world champion going around these days. I expected Oubaali to sneak it off points, or at least thought Donaire would have a lot more trouble with Oubaali. But Caballo, although he's not Oubaali, was an undefeated fighter. It was an impressive win nonetheless. So Nonito Donaire has checked the form book since that war with Inoue, and he really seems to have really good monstrous power at bantamweight since he's moved down. I think featherweight was always a step too far for him, really, and at bantamweight he really seems to be hitting his weight, and he looks rejuvenated to me. He's going to be 39 years old. It's ancient for a bantamweight champion. He's the defending WBA, IBF, and the ring world champion, whereas Donaire brings the WBC belt to the table. So for Naoya Inoue, I think the lessons that he has to learn from the first fight is quite simple. He tried to go for the knockout too quickly. I think first time around he thought that he would steamroll Donaire, and that was a grave mistake. So this time around, I would say Naoya Inoue need to keep the game at a distance. That's where he's better. He needs to use his jab with consistency, throw the right hand over Donaire's jab like he did successfully in the first fight, and not be quite as aggressive. And another thing that worked against Donaire in the first fight, eventually he did hurt him going to the body. Donaire took what he could throw to bed, but he hurt him in the body. So if I was in Naoya Inoue's corner, I'd tell him to box behind the jab, use the straight shots, and work that body whenever he gets in close. Don't stand there at mid-range and exchange power punches with Nonito Donaire, because that's where he is in with a chance. Now for Nonito Donaire, I think he has got to use some controlled aggression. He's got to use his jab, make sure he doesn't get countered over that. And he can be hurt into a body, but he could take that body attack from Inoue away by attacking Inoue's body first. So if I'm Donaire, I would go after Inoue's body, and I'd try and keep the fight close here in front of Inoue and use the angles to step away from the attacks as they come from Inoue. And this time when he hurts Inoue, I think he's got to take a chance. He's got to empty the tank, take the risk of punching himself out, but he's got to try and get Inoue out of it. I don't think I can't see him winning a decision easily. But in that first fight, Naoya Inoue suffered a fractured orbital bone, and I believe he also broke his nose. So he took some damage, more damage than Donaire took. So I am going against the grain here. I kind of, maybe it's a feeling, but Donaire's form since the Inoue fight has been exemplary. Naoya Inoue, for his part, fought 3 times. Jason Maloney was the best of him. Michael Das Marinas, and then against a Thai guy, Dipain, that went some rounds before getting stopped, but he was more fighting to survive. I think since the first Donaire fight, Inoue has not really had somebody that really challenged him and pushed him the way Donaire will. And I think Nonito Donaire at the weight, for me, is slightly the stronger guy. I won't say he's got the better power. Inoue is a monstrous puncher, pardon the pun, but I think he's physically the stronger the guy of the two. He's went all the way up to featherweight, and he's a stockier, stronger guy. So I am going to stick my head out, and it's a long shot. And it sounds crazy if you consider that Nonito Donaire is a bantamweight champion with WBC belt, older at the age of 39. And it would be a huge thing for Donaire to pull this off. He already has a surefire Hall of Fame career. He's been one of the mainstays of Filipino boxing, along with Manny Pacquiao. And I have a feeling that Nonito Donaire is going to pull it off. These things like fractured orbital bones, that sort of facial damage, a broken nose is powerful, of course, if you're a professional boxer. Orbital bones, that kind of thing, that damage tends to linger. And it didn't show up in his last 3 fights. But he didn't have people with the heavy hands of Donaire. I think if Nonito Donaire uses his jab, works the body, and not only relies on the left hook, take those rights also in the equation like he did the first time out. And this time, if he gets Inoue in trouble, he needs to go for broke. I just have a slight feeling it's going to be similar to the first fight. I think Inoue is going to use his jab more. I think he is going to try and open the distance. But I think Donaire will touch him at some point. And I have a feeling that Inoue's facial features may not last. He might get a closed eye, and that will be a turning point in the fight. So I'm going to stick my head out here. And I'm going to say that Nonito Donaire is going to spring this big upset in the Saitama Super Arena, and at some point in the fight do some damage to Inoue, and this time manage to get him out of there and score a stoppage somewhere around 8 or 9. So that's what I think. Nobody agrees with me, but I just have this feeling about Nonito Donaire. But Naoya, Inoue, Nonito, Donaire, it's going to be a great fight with big hitters who come to go to war. My favorite fighter, Naoya Inoue, as I've said, also a big Donaire fan, but I think it's a can't miss fight. So I'm not sure where it will be showing. It's usually in the morning here in South Africa's hours, in the mid-morning when it is in Japan. But I'm going to try and find a stream or something somewhere so that I can watch this fight. And looking forward to it. And let's see if Naoya Inoue and Nonito Donaire can give us another Fight of the Year candidate. I think they may well possibly do that. And until we see each other again, if you've listened this far, might as well give a video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you didn't already. And remember to keep those hands up.